Chapter 9 of The Dragon and the Raven by G. A. Henty. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Mike Harris. The Dragon and the Raven by G. A. Henty. Chapter 9. The Prisoner. When Edmund recovered his senses, he found that he was being carried along on a rough litter through the forest. It was some little time before he realized his position and recalled the circumstances of the attack. After the dragon had moved safely out into the fjord, his assailants had returned to the spot where they had attacked the 3 Saxons who had landed. 2 of them were without life, but they found that the third, who from his habiliments was evidently of higher rank, and whom they judged, although still but a youth, to be the commander of the Saxon party, had only been stunned by the blow of the club which had felled him. It was at once resolved to carry him to the Jarl of the district, who would assuredly wish to learn from him the meaning of the coming of the strange ship. That the Dragon was a Saxon vessel the Northmen were sure. Many of them had been on expeditions across the seas, and knew the Saxons both from their dress and manner of wearing their hair. But the ship was unlike anything they had seen before, and it seemed above all things strange that when, as they understood, England had been completely conquered, Saxon warships should be entering a northern fjord. For many hours Edmund was carried through the forest. He wondered to himself whether he would be slain on his arrival or kept as a slave, for the Norse and Saxon tongues were so similar that he was perfectly able to understand the language of his captors. A party of 12 men accompanied him, 4 of whom bore the litter, and were relieved at intervals by the others. After some hours the feelings of giddiness and weakness passed off, and on the men stopping to change bearers, he expressed his readiness to walk. Hitherto he had lain with his eyes closed, as he thought it better to remain as he was, until he felt perfectly able to keep up with his captors in a journey which might, for aught he knew, be a long time. The Northmen expressed their satisfaction at finding that their burden need no longer be carried, and throwing aside the boughs which had formed the litter, proceeded with him on their way. They asked him many questions concerning the Dragon. Most of these he answered readily, but he evaded those as to the place where she had been built, or the port from which she had sailed. It was not until late in the afternoon that they arrived at the abode of the Jarl Bjorn. It was a rough abode, constructed of timber, thatched with rushes, for as yet the Northmen were scarcely a settled people, the tribes for the most part wandering in the forests hunting when not engaged in those warlike expeditions which they loved above all other things. Only the leaders dwelt in anything like permanent abodes, the rest raising huts of boughs at such places as they might make any stay at. One of Edmund's conductors had gone on ahead, and as the party approached the building Bjorn came out from his house to meet them. He was, like almost all Northmen, a man of great stature and immense strength. Some 50 years had passed over his head, but he was still in the prime of his life. For the Northmen, owing to their life of constant activity, the development of their muscles from childhood, and their existence passed in the open air, retained their strength and vigour to a great age. So assiduous was their training, and so rapidly did their figures develop in consequence, that at the age of 15 a young Northman received arms and was regarded as a man, although he did not marry until many years afterwards, early wedlock being strongly discouraged among them. By Bjorn's side stood his son, who, though but 22 years old, rivalled him in stature and in muscular development, although lacking the great width of shoulder of the Jarl. As Edmund approached, a war horse of the Jarl, fastened up to a post close to the entrance of the house, neighed loudly. Bjorn looked surprised. The neighing of a horse among the Northmen was regarded as the happiest of auguries, and in their sacred groves horses were tied up, as the neighing of these animals was considered an infallible proof that a propitious answer would be given by the gods to the prayer of any petitioner who sought their aid. "By Thor!" Bjorn exclaimed, "my good war horse welcomes the stranger. As I said to you anon, Sweyn, I had intended to offer him as a sacrifice to Odin, but as the gods have thus declared him welcome here, I must needs change my intentions. Who are you, young Saxon?" he asked as Edmund was brought before him, "and whence do you come, and how is it that a warship of your people is found upon our coasts?" "I am Edmund," the young man said steadily, "an ealdorman of King Alfred of the West Saxons. The ship which was seen on your coast is mine. I built it to attack the Northmen who harry our coasts. I am here because, when in chase of 4 of your ships, a storm arose and blew us thither." "You speak boldly," the jarl said, "for one in the hands of his foes. How old are you?" "I am 22," Edmund replied. "The same age as you, Sweyn. Stand side by side and let me compare you. Ay," he went on, "he lacks nigh 3 inches of your height, but he is more than that bigger across the shoulders. A stalwart young champion indeed, and does brave credit to his rearing. These West Saxons have shown themselves worthy foemen, and handled us roughly last year, as this will testify," and he pointed to the scar of a sword cut across his face. "Doubtless this is the son of that Saxon earl who more than once last summer inflicted heavy losses upon us. Is that so, young Saxon?" "I am the Ealdorman Edmund himself," the young man replied quietly. "My successes were won not by my own strength or courage, but by the valour of those under me, who, fighting in a novel manner, gained advantage over your Northmen." "By Thor!" Bijorn exclaimed, "and this is the youth who attacked us at night and drove off the cattle we had taken, and slew many of our followers, Sweyn. Truly he would be a rare sacrifice to offer to Odin, but the god has himself welcomed him here." "It may be that he welcomed him as a sacrifice, father," Sweyn suggested. "Ah, that may be so," the jarl replied. "We must consult the omens to find out the true meaning of my charger's neighing. Nevertheless, in either case I shall be content, for he be not welcomed as a sacrifice, he is welcome as bringing good fortune, and in truth he will make a noble cup bearer to me. It is not every jarl who is waited upon by a Saxon ealdorman. But till the omens have spoken, let him be set aside and carefully watched. In a day or two we will journey to Odin's temple, and there consult the auguries." 3 days passed, during which Edmund was well fed and treated. At the end of that time he was ordered to accompany the jarl on a journey. 2 days' travelling brought them to a temple of Odin. It was a rough structure of unhewn stone situated in a wood. Bijorn and his son entered, while Edmund remained without under a guard. Presently the jarl and his son came out with a priest. The latter carried a white bag in his hand with 12 small pieces of wood. On half of these 4 small nicks were cut, on the other 5 nicks. All were placed in the bag, which was then shaken. "Now," the priest said, "you will see the will of Odin. The first 3 sticks drawn out will declare it. If 2 of the 3 bear an even number of nicks, the neighing of your horse signifies that Odin accepted the sacrifice. If 2 of them bear unequal numbers, then it meant his coming was propitious to you." The bag was again shaken. Edmund looked on calmly, for Saxons and Northmen alike disdained to show the slightest fear of death. Even the colour did not fade from his cheek as he watched the trial upon which his life depended. The first stick drawn out bore 5 marks. The priest showed it to the jarl, and without a word dropped it in the bag again. This was again shaken, and another stick drawn out. This bore but 4 notches. The chances were even. The silence was unbroken until the 3rd twig was drawn. "Odin has spoken," the priest said. "The neigh of the horse indicated that the coming of this Saxon was propitious to your house." The jarl gave an exclamation of satisfaction, while Sweyn's brow darkened. Bijorn had indeed set his heart upon retaining this famous young Saxon leader as his slave and cupbearer, and it was probable that in his interview with the priest before the drawing his inclinations had been clearly shown, for a slight difference between the thickness of the sticks might well have existed, and served as an index to the priest in drawing them. Bijorn, in his gratification at the answer of the god, bestowed a handsome present upon the priest, and then rode back to his abode well content with his journey. Edmund was at once installed in his new duties. Hitherto he had not entered the house nor seen the females of the family. Ulfra, the jarl's wife, was a woman of commanding stature and appearance. Like most of the northern women, she had accompanied her husband in his many wanderings, and shared his dangers and privations. The wives of the Norsemen occupied a far more exalted position in the households of their lords than those of the people of southern Europe. They were not only mistresses of the house, but were treated with respect as well as with affection. They were not, as in the south, regarded as puppets for the amusement of an idle hour, but were the companions and advisers of their husbands, occupying a position at least as free and respected as at the present day. There were 2 daughters, who both bade fair to resemble their mother in stature and dignity of demeanour, for both were models of female strength and activity. Edmund's duties were light. In the morning he gathered firewood for the household, at the meals he handed the dishes, and taking his station behind